Welcome everyone, we will start. So welcome to this new seminar in Ecology and Evolution of Montpellier. As usual, a few technical words for those of you who are online. You are in a webinar mode, which means that your mics and cameras are automatically switched off. If you have any technical issue, please use the chat and we will try to solve the problem. And if you want to ask questions to our speaker, you can use the Q&R tab to write your question, and then we can open your mic to give you the floor after the talk to ask your question. A reminder, we have currently a call opened to invite researchers for these seminars from next March to October. The call is closing at the end of the month on the 31st of January, midday, because we have a meeting in the afternoon to select proposals. So please feel free to propose invitees for these seminars. It's fully opened. And then I will introduce today's speaker because I'm the person inviting Jerome. So it's a pleasure for me to introduce Jerome Bourjea, who is a researcher at Ifremer, and he's working in the MARBEC mixed research unit. Jerome studied ecology and evolution at Montpellier University, and then he studied fisheries science at the engineering school ENSA in Rennes. And he was recruited at Ifremer in 2002, so more than 20 years ago. And Jerome was a lucky guy, because his first position was at the Indian Ocean's Ifremer delegation, which means in the Réunion Island, where he spent 15 years there. And he developed there several and led several major research programs on marine megafauna, including swordfish, tuna, marlin, and of course sea turtles, which will be the subject of today's conference. In 2016, so after 15 years in the Réunion Island, Jerome joined the MARBEC research unit, Métropole, and he has been the head of the fisheries laboratory of Ifremer in Sète from 2017 to 2020. When he joined the MARBEC research unit, he expanded his fields of research to also coastal fisheries science, looking at the spatial ecology of fisheries resources, notably on sea bream, sea bass, and salema. So Jerome's work is mostly about understanding and protecting marine life, especially marine megafauna, including large migratory pelagics and turtles. He is combining various fields, including conservation biology, population genetics, marine ecology, and fisheries science. And much of his research focused on the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. He has always been involved in international networks. He has been, for instance, he's actually co-chairing the IUCN Marine Turtle Expert Group for 10 years in the Western Indian Ocean region. He has been also a member of the Scientific Advisory Committee of the Migratory Species Commission for the UN, especially for sea turtles. And he has been also chairing the working group on billfish for the Indian Ocean. So today, Jerome will share with us his insights and experiences on the fascinating world of sea turtles and the importance of preserving marine ecosystems. So Jerome, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bruno. I'm feeling older after his speech. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. And the idea of this talk is just to bring a lot of different kind of stuff around an endangered species, just for you to understand that can help improving the conservation of specific species, then the ecosystem. So we'll invite you to big dive on the big swim in the Indian Ocean around marine turtles.
You can the slide first sometimes.
So as I come from a French literature teacher family, I have to start my talk by a citation from Victor Hugo that pushed me to work on science. That is, the inside, to see the inside the sea is to see the imagination of the unknown. And my main motivation was to understand that unknown. And I started doing some field trips, and I quickly fall in love with another Comorian proverb that says, where they have waves, there's a way out. Why? Because life is not simple, so the more it's complex is where the solution it is to improve the conservation of animals. So marine environment manager nowadays, like fisheries, marine biodiversity manager, must ensure the sustainable protection of marine resources. And they're faced nowadays to real challenge, as you know, mainly because of climate change and etc. So they need to identify the threats, prioritize, and act to improve the conservation of the species. But this means money. Of course, they cannot work on everything at the same time. So they need to identify the main threats and to prioritize the action that they will do. So they need those who observe and know. So they need us scientists as a first step to provide them with key information. And in fact, the world is almost complex. So what you see here is the air temperature and the winds. So that makes it difficult to understand terrestrial animals' behavior and etc. because everything is all the time changing with weather, with season, and etc. But in the marine environment, you need to keep in mind that it's even worse because it's damp, it's salty, it's airless, in constant motion too, with permanent pressure constraints. So for example, when you attach a device on an animal with electronics, everything gets more difficult. So you need to keep in mind that all the work we try to do on marine life is pretty much more complex than what guys are doing on the terrestrial lands. So all of this leads to specific behavior, see also dispersal, spatial dynamic, distribution, and making it difficult and complex to understand the marine life and then to improve the management and conservation of the species. And this is even true for the Western Indian Ocean. Here, it's what is moving the currents, and the color is just sea temperature. You can see that we also have a large gradient of temperature. And for example, in the Mozambique Channel, in between Madagascar and the East African coast, you have a lot of mesoscale gyre that make a lot of complex movements that complexify the understanding of dispersal, for example, of animals. And all of this is also under seasonality. Like the color here is just the anomaly of sea surface temperature. For example, in that specific case, all the Mozambique Channel is cooler than the medium. And for La Réunion, for example, it was warm on that. So everything makes even more complex in the marine world. The Western Indian Ocean, well, is considered to be one of the most important hotspots of biodiversity, terrestrial and marine, in the planet. It's mainly because of mangroves, of seagrass beds, and the coral ecosystems that provide a lot of biodiversity within those ecosystems. But that region is also known to be one of the most threatened in the planet, with a loss of biodiversity that is really important. And that area was a priority biodiversity conservation area as one of the most highly threatened in the planet. And all of this is true also for marine turtles. Marine turtles, we have the chance to only see them on fantastic places. Here is just a mating, a female and a male. The male above the female on Mayotte Island. This is a nesting green turtles coming down Glorious Island. That is one of the Epars Island in the northern part of the Mozambique. This is an hatchling and a female coming down in Comoros Islands. Well, you have some living people there. The question is, this is the child or the baby of that mother. So you need to think maybe both of them are going together. This is one of very great places, fully protected in the Epars Island, that is called Glorious Island. And this is the boat we use to go and do some research on fish and megafauna on this island. So again, fantastic places to work. So thanks to the marine turtles. This is also one of the most important nesting beach for green turtles 400 years ago. Now you start to see that the impact of the human activities. Now in La Réunion, it's la baie de Saint-Paul in La Réunion, you have no more sea turtle nesting on that beaches. So you start seeing the impact that we human can have on such kind of species. I'm not sure that you are aware of how works the turtles. What is the life cycle of turtles? So it's quite complex. So I will just resume it. It's like the chicken and the eggs issue. So I will start from the egg. So then a turtle come, lay the egg on the beach. Then you have the hatchlings that run on the beach to the sea, and they swim very fast to open sea waters. They spend between 1 and 10 years in the open sea. So we really have no access to this stage of life because they're really lost in the sea. And then when they reach a special size, they are able to be protected against most of the predators. So they recruit on the coast, become an immature. They spend 10 to 15 years growing up to become an adult. And then being an adult, they start the migration for nesting. They mate, they nest on the beach. They come back on the same beach they're born. So like the salmons, for example. And then they start doing a cycle. So all of this take place at the scale of an ocean. And for 35 years, 30 to 35 years for the first nest. Start understanding this can be quite complex to understand. But it's even worse because you have a phase that is fully pelagic at the open sea. For the juvenile, for the migrations, you have the coastal feeding habitats for bring up, for the adults to grow up and make the reserves for reproduction. You have a coastal reproduction habitat that is not the same as the foraging grounds where they mate. And then you have a terrestrial habitat. So all of this, okay, you have the scale of the oceans, you have 35 years to 80 years because the living of a green turtle is 80 years, for example. And all of this with a lot of different kind of ecosystems. So trying to understand the pieces of the puzzle can be quite tricky. That's why we use what we call the conservation biology discipline. I don't know if you heard about it, I'm sure yes. So one of the definition, it's a crisis discipline that applies the principle of ecology, biogeography, population genetic, anthropology, ecology, economy, sociology, and etc. to the maintenance of the biodiversity throughout the planet. In other words, you take everything you know, you make a big soup, and then you extract what is interesting in terms of management. In the specific case of sea turtles, there is 4 pillars under that biological conservation biology approach. The first is to estimate the abundance and the trends of nesters. So you just want to know in a specific place if you have a decreasing, increasing, or stable population of females. The second one is to understand a very important point, the population structure and the connectivity, the relationship between the different populations you are looking at. The third one, of course, to characterize the anthropogenic pressure and the impact on each population. And then you make the soup and you prioritize for action that can improve the conservation of those species. Just some words on connectivities because it's really important in the case of large migratory species. So you're in the Southwest Indian Ocean, you have 3 populations, 3 sites. You can understand here that you have no link between the sites. But then you can start to have few links, more links, or the population can be fully linked one to each other. So this is the concept of connectivity versus isolation. So the less connection you have, the more connected you are. But then if you don't have any connection with other populations, you are isolated. And this concept is really important because basically the more a population is isolated, the less it depends on the status of the other population. But the more the population is vulnerable locally, so they need a local management. The more populations are connected one to each other, the more they are dependent one to each other, of course. So the population are locally less vulnerable because it can have inputs from other populations, but it depends on what's happened elsewhere. Of course, all of this is too simple and the system is pretty much more complex because it depends on the life history of each species you are working on, and of course the characteristic dynamic of the environment and the ecosystem they use. So the idea beyond that is we need a multidisciplinary approach to fully understand the connectivity at small, large scale, at different temporal scales, at different geographical scales. So let's go deeper on what we did on marine turtles. So population abundance and trends. How can we learn about the status of specific population? While keeping track on them. Why keeping track on them? Because the turtle, when they go on the beach, they mark a big track. So easy. You don't need to be on the beach to see the turtle. Okay, I have one turtle nesting. You just go in the morning and then you count the tracks. It's pretty much more complex than that, but let's do it simple. And then you can follow that over time, and you have a time series of number of tracks, like a proxy of the abundance of the individuals. And then you can start working on them with different kind of model, GAMs, seasonal decomposition, time series, wavelet, and etc. to extract the seasonality and then the tendencies over time. And this is the case of Moeli Island. We have an increasing population. So this is the main spots of nesting green turtles in the Western Indian Ocean that we know. And most of them were very well followed since the last 30 to 40 years. So we have long-term series of tracks. So we do that for all the sites. Here's some example, a very important increase of the number of tracks in Moeli Island, also the number of nesters, also in Sète Island and in the Epars Island. All of them are more or less increasing. Note for Tromelin, you have a decrease. This is a decrease of the number of tracks. So we just said, oh, we may have a problem on Tromelin. But it's not, but it was not the case, because then we did some deeper approaches to follow each turtle, and we just understood that even if we had a decrease in the number of tracks, the number of female nesting were stable, because a turtle used to do less track over time in Tromelin than previously. So even if we have a decrease of the number of tracks, the number of turtle abundance kept the same over the last 30 years. So that's why it's important when you work on a proxy to just be sure of which kind of proxy you are looking at. Here it was the number of tracks, not the number of female. What interests us is the number of female. So sometimes you need to correct your proxy to be just sure of what you are looking at. So good point. We have a very healthy nesting population in the Western Indian Ocean. It was also the case in Aldabra and different other sites that they didn't show. So what interested us is what is the connectivity, the structure of this population. So we do some genetics. I'm sure you're pretty much better than me on that. So the idea was almost simple. We just take a piece of DNA. We just look at the mitochondrial DNA part of the control region. We look at the mutation on one individual. We did it on a sample for a single place. We then have haplotype frequencies. And then we did it in different places. And this helped us to understand if you have a connection or not between the sites. For example, you have the frequencies of the blue one and the green one that are almost the same between site 1 and site 3. You may expect to have quite a lot of connectivities between them. But in the case of La Réunion here, you have a frequency that is different. So we may expect to have an isolation from the two other ones. So this is basically the concept. And this is this approach works particularly well with phylopatric species because we are working on mitochondrial DNA, like the salmon and turtles that tend to structure the female part of the population. So we did that on turtles. So we just go on the field, we sample a nester, we took a piece of tissue, we identified the turtle, and then we did DNA extraction, the amplification of a part of the control region, and we look at the mutations. And we did that in most of the places where turtle nest in the Western Indian Ocean, just to have the global view of the different haplotype frequencies we have for that part of the control region. And the result was quite very interesting. This is the phylogenetic tree of the different haplotypes we have, and we clearly have 3 different phases. The first one, it's very typical from the Atlantic. We have another clade that is typical from the Indian Ocean, and the third clade that is typical from the West Pacific Ocean. So we start to understand that, okay, we may have over ocean connectivities on that area of the world. And the question was, are there differences in genetic structure now based on those different clades on the Western Indian Ocean? So we just look at where are spread those clades in the Western Indian Ocean, and of course we did some classic genetic statistic on that, and then we just identified something very clear, that the clade one was mainly centered in the south of the Mozambique Channel around Europa Island. The second one were found almost everywhere. And the last one was typical from the Seychelles area. The last one was coming from the West Pacific, and the clade one was coming from the Atlantic. So that was pretty much interesting, because with that we clearly defined 4 distinct genetic management units on that area. And in fact, it's not really 4, it's more 3, let's say. So this is a really important answer in terms of conservation at the regional scale. Now, just to try to understand why we have such a pattern in the Western Indian Ocean. This is another paper that we did. We did the global phylogeography of green over the planet. So you can clearly see the gray one that is part of the Atlantic, that at one moment, or mainly still now, went from the Cape of Good Hope in the south of the Mozambique Channel, and then the red one and the orange one in the northern part of the Mozambique, coming from the West Pacific. So we try to explain that. We try to understand how this was possible. While looking at the currentology, can be quite easy to understand in the case of the clade tree, because in the Indian Ocean is mainly driven by the south equatorial current that is a very strong westward current that comes from the Indonesia until the northern part of the Western Indian Ocean. So this most probably had bring some offspring from the West Pacific until that region. Some of them may have come back to nest 20 years ago in the West Pacific, but as it was quite far and against the currents in this area, maybe some stay there and start a colonization in the western part of the Indian Ocean in the Seychelles. So we just thought, okay, it was almost the same for clade one. We may have a current that is taking some individuals from the Atlantic inside the Western Indian Ocean. But this is not currently possible, because in the western part of the Indian Ocean, you have the Agulhas current, that is very huge and powerful current that comes from the Indian Ocean around around Africa until the Atlantic. So it's impossible for an hatchling or even an adult to come from the Atlantic in the Indian Ocean. So looking at past currents, what is more probably is that for the last glaciation, there is a windows where the currents in that area were reversed. So we start to have a first colonization from individuals from the Atlantic inside the Indian Ocean. That stopped because of the play of the glaciation. So this is one of the interpretations. And at the present time, we are now going very deeper, because we're sequencing the whole mtDNA to look deeper at all the mutations on that part, and also running a lot of SNPs to try to have the best picture of the structure of green on that region. This is an ongoing work. So it's fun, because we start seeing that we have a structure of the population nesting this area. But what is very interesting is what is the current connectivity of the animals. I told you that a female that nests on a place feed very far from the place they nest, sometimes 3,000 kilometers. So what is the short physical connectivities between the individuals? So for that, and it was a great work that we did with Simon, one of the great work we did, we deployed some satellite tracks of the turtles. And this is the example of Europa. We just saw the nester going to foraging grounds, just an explosion in this area. And we did that in most of the places of the Western Indian Ocean. And we just saw that even if nester always come to the same place to nest, it explodes, and they use all the countries and all the ecosystem on this area to feed. So all the different stocks mixed together at foraging ground. So you start to see that it can be complex to manage such kind of species. And then we work on the data set, and this is a really great model that Simon here had developed. We just built a kind of migratory maps showing us where are the highest density of individuals we may have in this region. And you can start seeing that, for example, the northern part of Mozambique, the red one, is a place where we have a lot of sea turtles navigating along the coast. Also, all the west coast of Madagascar. So you start understanding that if you want to close the fisheries because they interact with marine turtles, you cannot just close the fisheries in the Western Indian Ocean. You can go more specifically on certain area and keep close to decrease the number of bycatch, for example, in northern part. Third point, threats. First one, I will not go in detail for each of them, but the first one is habitat degradation. So they are clearly facing, because of the human activities, but also because of climate change, degradation of foraging habitats or nesting habitats. We have marine pollution that is becoming a very important issue on marine turtles. For example, at La Réunion, some fishermen bring us some turtles, and then we do a stomach cleaning. And for some of them, they have half a kilo of macroplastic in the stomach. And these individuals are pelagic ones. So it's loggerhead pelagic, 40 kilos, 40 to 50 kilos, half a kilo max of macroplastic in the stomach. And then all the implication of microplastic and etc. on the health of the turtles. So we believe that is a really important issue for marine turtles. Poaching, it's a region in the Western Indian Ocean where you still have a lot of poaching. There is a study that showed that 10,000 turtles were killed only in the western part of Madagascar. So it's still a big issue. And of course, fisheries. Industrial fisheries with trawling, net fishing, long lining, cruise seining, and artisanal fishing. So I will not go in detail on all of that, but only on one because pretty much interesting. It's the case of the pure seine. A couple of years ago, a lot of ecologists just start saying the pure seine fisheries kills a lot of turtle in the world. You need to stop that fisheries, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So who doesn't know? Pure seine fisheries is like a big boat, 100 meters. They hunt tuna schools. They just follow the schools of tuna, and then with a big net that is 2,000 meters, they just encircle the school, and then the net fall down, they close the net down, and then they remove everything on the boat. So they catch on 3 schools the tunas. Another way of this fisheries, they use fish aggregating devices. It's a structure that they just release at sea with a satellite buoy that have the capacity of aggregate tuna under it. So then they just do collection. They just follow their fads, and then they encircle the fad, remove the tunas, and etc. So the question was, as these fisheries have an impact in terms of that? So we had the chance to analyze 17 years of observer data deployed on the European Union and fleets in the Atlantic, in the Pacific, in the Indian Ocean, with the question that does these fisheries have an impact to answer the ecology. So we start looking at all the sets under the fish aggregating devices, the observed set with an observer on board, and then we record the bycatch. We do the same on free swimming school to see if there is an effect of fad, of course. And then we went on the analysis. So we just build a map like that one of bycatch density in both oceans. And we look at the barycenter of the bycatch. And this is some ecological, very interesting point, because the barycenter is dependent on the species distribution. For example, the red one, now it's the olive ridley. The olive ridley do not nest in the southern part of Indian Ocean. They nest mainly in India. And all the bycatch are in the northern part of the area where the pure seine is fishing. Whereas the purple one is the green one. The green one, the barycenter, is very down because most of the green turtle nest where I show you around Madagascar. So it's very interesting to see that also the distribution of bycatch is linked with the distribution of species. So this is more an ecological or interesting aspects. So we went the analysis on the data, and at the end, we estimate that these fisheries in the Indian Ocean kill 35 turtle per year. It's almost nothing. The longline fisheries kill 200,000 loggerhead per year in the world. So we just show to ecologists that, okay, just slow down, because no, it's not the case. It's not the big issue in terms of threat for marine turtles. Need to keep in mind that we may have something that is important with that fisheries is the cryptic mortality. To build the FADs, the fish aggregating device, they used to put a lot of nets, and the turtles also aggregated under the device, and they get entangled on the net and they jump. So we don't have a real idea of the impact of drifting nets, of drifting FADs. And we are talking about 100,000 of drifting nets. It's not just 100 in the ocean, it's a lot. So this is a point that we still need to try to better understand. Nowadays, the fisherman is less and less using nets to build the FADs. So most probably the impact of lost FADs on turtle most probably is very low. So to summarize, which fishery has the greatest impact on sea turtle? Well, Crusader, as I just showed you, not much. Pelagic longline, yes, for sure, but not on all species. It's mainly on very two species, the loggerhead and the leatherback. For the green and the hawksbill, I just show you until now, the impact is very minimum. You have the trawling that may have in some part of the world a very important impact on turtles. But you have to know that in the Western Indian Ocean, there is almost no trawling. And the few there is, they use TEDs, turtle excluding device. It's a trap at the end of the net that allows the turtle to went out the net. So the impact in the Western Indian Ocean should be very minimum. Industrial fishing nets, so the long nets, this is a really huge impact on marine turtles, mainly in the northern part of the Indian Ocean, not in the southwest, because there is no industrial fishing net in the Western Indian Ocean, only small nets. And my point of view, in the Western Indian Ocean, the most important issue related to fisheries and marine turtles is the artisanal coastal subsistence fisheries, because they're used to catch turtle, they eat the turtle, there is a lot of nets and different kind of gear that has most probably a really important impact on turtle. But it's very hard to monitor over time this kind of fisheries because it's lost along the coast and etc. Now I give you an idea of what happens on adults. But what is important is the next generation. So the juvenile that never went on the beach. They're only at sea at the coastal level. So we start being interested on that stage of life because it's the next generation, the next nester, male or female. So the issue was to catch them because it's impossible to catch them on land. So we developed a technique that we call the rodeo turtle. It's fun, a bit dangerous. So you have a driver that follows the turtle that is swimming, and then you have a jumper, and at a certain moment, the jumper jumps on the turtle and catch the turtle. I heard that some of you guys do something on Impala, so you know what I'm talking about. So then we catch the turtles. Sometimes we are not the only one that do the same. Tiger shark on the site we're working on do exactly the same. So that turtle was just bitten by a tiger shark a couple of minutes before we catch it. So it's always a bit of stress. And then another technique that we have in other places such as La Réunion, where you don't have lagoons really. So we go diving. In my point of view, it's more dangerous than turtle jumping because when you are diving, you know, you have all the decompression process that can be really dangerous for us. Anyway, we know how to catch them. And then once you have the juveniles, you can do more or less what you want. So you can do all the sampling you are interested in. I'm just coming from La Réunion. We did some laparoscopy to identify the sex of the juveniles. And then you can attach also some devices such as this satellite tile. So what we did, we start understanding the home range, if a turtle in a specific place stay all the time, or how many years, are they moving from one ecosystem to another one, and etc. So we start deploying satellite tags on different places. This is the example of Europa. So we deploy satellite GPS tags on the turtle just to understand the relationship between the juvenile and the mangrove. We start learning a lot of things, like for example, the home range was really small. They do not, some are specialized on mud area, the other one on more rocky ones, and etc. And the interesting point on that video is the last one, because the size of the turtle there is until 65 centimeters of carapace length. A turtle adult is 90, 90. So we have a gap in juveniles in Europa. So one of the hypotheses was, okay, there is not enough food. So at one moment, the juvenile just move out Europa to reach large seagrass beds in Madagascar. And what we see was one of them. We just saw it was a 65 one going out of Europa and reach Madagascar, the large seagrass beds. The day after the turtle reached Madagascar, he was caught by Latino fisheries. And we found the tag on the turtle on a small village north of Tulia. So just for you to understand the pressure that these two species have at the coastal level based on artisanal fishery. What's that now? So we did that in most of the developmental sites in Lockdown, so in Glorieuses, in Joan de Nova, in Mayotte, in La Réunion, and we start understanding better such the behavior on those areas. For example, we saw that there is a strong day and night segregation of the locations that do not fit on the same space as the rest. For example, it's an interesting point. And the home range is really small, meaning that's just a couple of football field. The area, the 95% of the time they spend in a very small area. And they stay in that area for a lot of years. So in terms of conservation, of local conservation, it's important because if you have an area where you have a lot of turtle, this area will not move with time because it's linked with the ecosystem, the habitats you have below. And working on, we had a very large data set in the Réunion Island, and we start developing some very powerful models of predictions because the idea was to link the position of the turtle with a fine scale mapping of the bottom. And then working on the rugosity of the fans, the quality of the coral, etc. We just extrapolate our data to the whole west coast of La Réunion in order to see, to explain to manager, here is maybe also an important area for marine turtles. So the yellow one is where we have realized locations with the turtle we tagged. And the red one is where it's potentially a very important site for them that we are expected to find them. And this lead the La Réunion government, the La Région Réunion, to decrease the speed of the boat on those areas. Because one of the main issues in La Réunion is boat striking on turtle. The turtle brief on surface, and then the boat arrive very quickly, bam, and break the fibers. And we have a lot of dead turtle because of that. So such kind of approach is important in terms of ecology, but also in terms of management, of local management of those states. And then we are really frustrated because we know the turtle is here, we know what we have below, but what is currently doing the turtle on this specific habitat? Are they really resting? Are they eating? Are they, I don't know, having interaction with other species? We just ask them. So please, turtle, tell me what you are doing. So we just collect, they send us a lot of pictures of what the turtle were doing. So we'll go very quickly, but we learn a lot on which kind of food they eat according to where they are. And one important point was that one. One here. Interaction between individuals. And we are working now on this data set to better understand. Just by the flicker. Why? My interpretation is that this is my hole where I rest, get out. So we thought that it was a very antisocial marine turtle where we are known to be antisocial, they have no relationship. But with all this information they send us, we start understanding that we may have some interaction, and then we are able to do some social work on them to better understand that. And of course, they didn't send us by email. We just deployed cameras on that in the different places, and it's a very large and big data set at the moment. It's quite hard to exploit, so it's still under analysis. Again, one of the questions was, okay, we have turtle in La Réunion, for example, but where do they come from? Explain you that they spent 15 years at sea before recruiting to the coast. Okay, but where do they come from? We know the stocks are females, so it was interesting for us to try to understand, okay, La Réunion will have a turtle from Aldabra, from Seychelles, or I don't know what. So we start to develop different kind of approach, and we linked the genetic approach to dispersal modeling. We just to passive dispersal modeling. We just said, okay, we have actions from that side. We just made a release passive based on currents, and we just will look at where potentially if the swing was 100% driven by currents, where this turtle is able to reach after 6 years, just to have a level. And we link that with some mixed stock analysis between the juveniles and the adults we have in the region. And this, we did a great paper on that. We just explained that, yes, the dispersal is fully dependent on the current you have in this region. And we have now an idea of the contribution of the different stocks to the developmental habitat. For example, in Europa, we just identified that you have a big auto-recruitment. So the turtle that is born in Europa disperse, and after 10 years, they come back to Europa. So this is unexpected. And for the other one, for example, for the northern part, the Seychelles is a very large provider of juvenile for all the Western Indian Ocean. So there's some very interesting regional information in the case of marine turtle. And then I told you, conservation genetic, you take everything, you make a big soup, and then you try to extract some points of interest in terms of management. That's what we did. We just take the map at the regional scale, and we identified some key priority management area, and each of them because of specific reasons. So I just detailed 3 of them, just for you to have an idea. The first one is that we identified in Europa as a really important management site for green turtle. Why? Because it's the largest green turtle breeding site in the Indian Ocean. So just for that, we need to preserve it. And it's a site that is growing in terms of female, so it's good health. Because the unique genetic heritage in the Indian Ocean, and you know that having a genetic diversity is really important to manage the climate change coming. We identified that the feeding sites, not the migratory sites, the feeding sites and the migratory sites were spread in all that area where you have a lot of interaction with artisanal fisheries. And because when we did that project on dispersal modeling, in our point of view, most of the hatchling born in Europa will be dead because they are pushed down by the currents, the famous aqueous currents, and they will finish on very cold waters. So on that model, the black particles are the one that stay more than, I don't remember exactly, 20 days below 15 degrees. We consider that the turtle is too small to swim against the currents. The probability of being dead is really high. So that means that the production that is very important because it's one of the biggest nesting sites in the region. At the end, the production of the next generation can be very small. So that's why we think that's a really priority area of conservation in this zone. The Mascarene Plateau, it's La Réunion, Maurice, Rodrigue, I don't know for who knows. Why? Because we have a residual nesting population there. We have 1 turtle per year that comes. So we need to keep it alive. Secondly, is that because we potentially have an ancestral genetic unit on that area, because the very few samples typical from them seems to indicate that the genetic heritage is really different from all the rest we have in this area. Because when we did such kind of dispersal modeling, the probability of an hatchling coming from Mayotte, Glorious, Seychelles, Europa, to know that the plateau, the mascarene plateau exists is really small, because all the model quite never send particles around this mascarene plateau. So the potentiality of colonization of that area is really small, because few things is taken until that area. But with time, because turtles are fully protected at the coast since the last 40 years in La Réunion, we have the number of juveniles increasing slowly and slowly. So as it's very slow but still growing, we need to increase our efforts. Another case study, the western part, the northern part of the Mozambique. Why? Because it's a huge connectivity part, I show you on the map, but it's also a place where you have a lot of final foraging ground for turtles in this region. So it's really hot spot of foraging for turtle in the region. So a lot of turtle pass that area. The place that we know that there is a lot of interaction with artisanal fisheries, and because they just discovered a couple of years ago one of the world's largest gas field. So you can imagine the potentiality of impact on biodiversity, including marine turtles. So to finish, nowadays the green turtles is globally endangered, classified by the red list as globally endangered all over the world. And we push the red list since a long time to say, no, you cannot give a status at the global planet, because each place are really different and they are not connected, so it's a bit stupid. So after all that work here on the other ocean, understanding the connectivity was a key process to identify regional management units that were agreed by the IUCN red list, and then they allow us to do a red list assessment at the regional scale. So we did that, for example, for the green, we just separate well the regional management units, and we just finished the red list assessment for the Western Indian Ocean. And by far, it's really clear that it's not classified as endangered in this region, but least concerned. So I think it's important also to show that, because that means that all the conservation efforts made by all the countries, including France, well, at least in that place, it works, because the green turtle is almost healthy then. And I will finish, this is a blink eye to my father that may be listening to us, that is specialized in Paul Valéry. We should call science only the set of recipes that always succeed. The soup, you know, the soup explained. Everything else is literature. I'm afraid that most of the things I told you is literature, because you understood that the system is really complex. We just pick up some solution or some understanding, but to have the deep, complete overview, to have the good recipes, is almost impossible. So we do as we can. And this is another lesson that I have from all that work on turtles. Just because you're small doesn't mean you can go as far as a big boy. That means that it's not because the issue you're looking at is wow, so crazy. No, let's go, you can do it. That's it. Thank you.
Questions for Jerome? Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. That's super interesting. I was wondering, because on one of the first maps you showed about the population abundance, I didn't see so many sites in Madagascar. Some sites in Madagascar. So I was wondering if it's because there's no so much to be there, or if there's no population.
Because they eat all the turtle nesting there. There is the sites along the East African coast and Madagascar are really small. We are talking about maximum hundreds of individuals, but mainly because they exploit the nesting turtle there. So even they are fully protected in Madagascar, in Mozambique. While when you are lost on the west coast of Madagascar, the people just can take a turtle, an adult, and eat it. And a turtle of 150 kilos will feed all the population of the small community for 2 weeks. So it's hard also to tell them, no, don't kill the turtle because, you know, it's biodiversity and etc. So but they just need it to feed. It's a bit complex, but in fact, yeah, there is almost no nesting big sites along the main coast. All the turtle nest on the islands in this region.
Thank you for the talk. You said there's a lot of unknown about the dispersal of the juveniles past the Atlas currents. Did you ever ask, because I was part of a group that was rescuing them in Cape Town and on the coast of South Africa, would it help you to have those data of where those juveniles are found and where they are released afterwards?
I work a lot with the guys from the KwaZulu-Natal National Park, and they have a lot of stranded turtles, small ones also. So we're in the process of collecting the tissue just to identify where they come from. So this is the first point, just to understand if they are majority coming from Europe or elsewhere. And the other point for the release, we have not more contact with them. And,
yeah, there's a group in the Two Oceans Aquarium in Cape Town. So they keep them for a while and then they release them just to do it. They
come back to the Indian Ocean part to
yes.
release them on warmer waters. Yeah.
They have the data of where each of them were picked up, and maybe they can do some sampling.
But the good point should be to have the genetic sample or a tissue sample, just to understand where do come from those stranded turtle in the Cape Town region.
I think they do that yet.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting.
That can be interesting. Maybe it's turtle coming from the Atlantic. I'm not sure about that. But it's just an hypothesis, the fact that in Europe, most of them, we believe they're going to die because of the very low temperature. But quickly after Europa, you fall down on the Agulhas currents. And then once you are in the Agulhas currents, you go to the Atlantic, and then you have a retroflexion to the Indian Ocean that is very down and very cold. So I don't see how a reptile can stay like a turtle in cold water for a long time without dying. So,
no, there's some years we found like 200 of them.
Yeah. I'm sure that they come from Europe.
Yeah, just because it has a sense. You say that in Europa you have the biggest nesting population, and since you think most of them are dying in the process in the Agulhas currents, but still you have the biggest nesting population. So how do you?
It's crazy, but you still have a part that gets alive. But you have a big production. We believe that part of that production will die compared to the other sites, but you still have a part. When you do the modeling, there is a lot of that come back to warmer water in the Indian Ocean. So part of them get alive. And as the production is quite big, they continue providing future adults for Europa. So
we have a question here.
Thanks a lot. It was really interesting. I know it's a difficult question, but if you would want to rate the world seabird community as a whole, would you say that things are going downhill, or rather that they are positive for that in terms of global population sizes for all sea turtles, not only the greens?
My point of view, personal point of view, is that it's increasing. The species getting better and better. At some sites, it's getting worse. So when you look globally, for example, the green is still classified as endangered. And I strongly believe, being part of this commission, that the status of endangered is more a political status. Because once you disclassify a species, you then open bad things to happen potentially. So I believe that there is a political issue in maintaining the bad status of a lot of species at the IUCN level. And globally, for marine turtles, my feeling is that a lot of population are going up. And there is a lot of very good work in the world, improving the management and then increasing the population. But there are still some parts of some species that is very small in terms of abundance, like the leatherback la tortue, and the hawksbill l'imbriqué. And the population abundance is very small on the planet. That may be of high risk if something happens in a specific place. So I think it's a good idea to maintain them as but my feeling is that it's going better.
So what happens to the turtles between hatching and when they come back to feed on coastal areas? Are they entirely pelagic? They feed on zooplankton or invertebrates or?
So we call that part the lost years for scientists because we really don't know what they are doing. They feed on zooplankton, on small particles, on what they find. Every time you have a device floating, like a piece of wood or anyone, you have turtle below because they will eat the small things that will be aggregated on a piece of wood, etc. But we have very few information on what they currently is doing, and also their ability to swim. Because when we run such kind of model, this is a passive disperser model. In other words, it's bullshit. But gives you an idea of the potential impact of climate. What we are trying to do is to try to do an IBM. We try to do a behavior on the particle as close as possible to the hatchlings with the few information we have. So the ability to swim when they will increase while the turtle will growing up, the needs of food growing up as they are growing. So we just start to try to build a model of active dispersal to try to better understand what they are doing in the open ocean. But we have very few information in the stages because we deployed some tags. Yeah, we were able, but because of the battery issue, the tags only span 1 month. And then, okay, you have the pattern of the turtle for 1 month, but then it's finished. So it's hard to have a long period in time to understand this.
How long until they recruit into coastal habitats?
We don't know because we don't know how to age the turtle. This is a very big issue for us. When you have a turtle that size, you can have 5 years or 18 years. So the size is not a proxy of the age. So at the moment, without cutting a flipper and looking at the bones, you are not able to say the age of the turtles. This is one of the key issues. And there is a lot of labs working on telomeres and things like that to try to age a turtle just with a sample. But at the moment, it's one of the biggest issues. We know that they need to reach a certain size to reproduce because the first one we see on the beach is, in the case of green, is 80, 85 centimeters. But is it 15 years old or 25-year-old or 35-year-old? It depends on the feeding ability, the ecosystem they had the chance to find to grow up. In La Réunion, which I just came back from a field trip, we had the chance to have some recapture of turtle that we caught 4 years ago, green juvenile. So 4 years ago, one of the cases, the turtle was 18 kilos. And we catch it back now, it was 44 kilos. So in 4 years, they grew up 25 kilos. It's really huge one. And we have no feedback on the quality of feeding grounds of La Réunion. So it seems that because in La Réunion, they eat red algae and not seagrass. And we do some energetic analysis on the seagrass to see if it's interesting for them or not. But the result seems to indicate that, okay, there is a lot of red algae, and it's good for them because the growth is quite high. All of this is pieces of the puzzle to try to understand them. Right.
Just wondering, how are you going to interpret your results, especially when you have so many people?
No, it's difficult for science. You do a project with Mozambique, Madagascar, and then you do paper. So it's already complicated, but it works. Then there is commissions. There is large commission. There is a memorandum of understanding for the Indian Ocean and the Southeast Asia, where we bring all the results, trying to push the different countries to put in place some management issues, some management regulation, etc. But we are always faced to the issue, the governmental issue on each country. Because in Mozambique, the most important thing is to get money, to have more money for the country. Biodiversity is all the time not the more important. I use a lot such kind of results to have more money for France. Because I told them, okay, look, Europe are glorious, they go to Madagascar and etc. So we need to have money to cooperate with them. So France gave money for us to cooperate with the different countries. So it was another way to have more money to work on that. And then we with an association I am working with, Catonia, in La Réunion. They are doing a very good work to teach the local communities, explaining them that, okay, you can't kill a turtle because you're gonna feed your tribe for 1 week. But if you develop an ecotourism, you can keep the turtle alive and make money that will be used for your community. So it's a way of explaining them, don't kill them, try to use that biodiversity flag species to make money. And then you have the big hotels that arrive, that destroy everything, that out of money. You understand the whole process. Complicated, always complicated. But I like because they nest only on beautiful places. So
Do we have more questions?
I have another question. How do you deal with for the threat assessment and the IUCN Stage 2 assessment? How do you deal with the uncertainty of not knowing the threat level, especially related to artisanal?
you don't want to know how it's the IUCN release assessment process. We are between us, we know there's plenty of person on internet, but I'm coming from a fishery stock assessment. I'm a fishery stock assessment researcher. I can just tell that the process of IUCN is a bit uncertain. No, it's strange. So how they deal with uncertainties, it's strange. Yeah. A lot of expert opinion. What is interesting in the process of stock assessment of red list is that 1 or 2 guys do the assessment following all the rules of the red list. So you arrive with a document with some data, etc., compiled data, and then send to a large panel of experts that will give them their feedback. So some of them will say, no. The other guy will say, yeah. It took me 5 years to do that assessment for the Western Indian Ocean. And I told them the last time. But at the same time, it's interesting because at the end, you arrive to an average, of the extreme left and the extreme right. You are just right in the middle. So, but it's red list is a strange approach, my point of view.
Just a comment or question on this, because you were saying that they shouldn't perhaps be classified anymore as endangered because their abundance is higher. But don't their criteria also account for demography or the vulnerability? Like if something has a slow population growth rate, then if you decline its abundance, it will take more time to recover. Or if it has a vulnerability in terms of nesting site and it can collapse very rapidly. Do they account for things like this?
Yeah. There is look at the process. It's I, B, C, D. There is 5 criteria, very different: abundance, trend, threats, etc. And each of them give you a ranking, and then it's the sum of all those things that will give you the final note or the final score. But I'm critiquing the case of turtle because it's a long-lived species. So the key approach of red list is to compare to what's happened in the past. So we don't know exactly what was the population in the past. So there is a lot of, for the past information, a lot of uncertainty in my opinion. So you're just comparing them with really in the past, so it's bad. So we are just comparing 1 or 2 generations ago, because the deal is to work at 5 generations. You look at the differences between 5 generations. 3 generations. So
isn't there a green status assessment happening for the green turtle?
Is it what?
A green status assessment. It's a new IUCN thing that is looking at not just at the status. So the red list has a shifting baseline problem because it only looks at 3 generations at a time. But there's a new framework to assess species based also on what what their current status is in relation to what that could be if the population is fully healthy and functioning. So, for example, the point that it's no longer breeding in Madagascar and the coast of Africa, the green status assessment would allow you to tell me that even though the species is increasing, it's actually highly depleted in relation to its historical baselines.
For the moment, for the turtle, we are on the process of redoing the assessment. The green is almost finishing now, and it started in 2015. So it takes 10 years to almost finish the assessment. So I assume that they are using the old one, the old approach. They cannot shift in the middle. But probably for the next assessment, they will.
This is a parallel thing to the realist. So the green state assessment is a parallel framework to the realist assessment. I thought we were doing something.
You have questions online? Nora, could you?
Yes, I don't know if you hear me.
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for your great presentation. It was very, very interesting. So maybe I've missed the information when you said it, but in the Mascarene area on the Réunion Island, you mentioned that there is a residual nesting population with a potentially ancestral genetic unit, with a unit heritage. So my question is what this implies the fact that there is potentially ancestral, genetic unit.
This is based on the PhD of Coralie Taquet in 2007, because in La Réunion you have Kelonia, it's an aquarium for turtle, that previously was a farm that exploit turtle to make cans. And this is a very old one. So they have on their tanks, now in the aquarium, very old turtles. And that person, that Coralie, did also genetic sampling on all the individuals in the farms. And she found one, you need to have a look on her PhD 15 years ago. She found some individuals with the very particular genetic characteristics. And one of the hypotheses, she said that it was an ancestral population that were still kept on the aquarium, on the farm at that time, that may be very of great interest. So the idea is to still maintain as possible and do patrolling on the beach, because we are still expecting that all turtles come back, that all juveniles come back to nest after 30 or 40 years that are part of the previous stocks. So that is one of the arguments there to monitor the beach and follow the beach in La Réunion.
Okay, thank you very much.
This is part of the literature I was talking about.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's interesting.
And so we have a second question. Nathan, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It was very, very interesting. And I had one question, because since many years we hear about the lost year between the hatchlings and the juvenile stage of life for sea turtles. And I wanted to know if there is any study, any reflection in the scientific community to improve knowledges about this topic, this stage of life, or if it's too complicated or it costs too many monies to improve the knowledges.
Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, as it's one part of the main gaps we have on the life cycle of the turtle, of course, it's of high importance. A lot of people want to better understand this part. So there is teams in the US that keep on tanks, for example, hatchlings, and they grew up and they just start understanding the ability of swim, just to improve the swimming parameters according to size of different species. So this will improve all the models, the active dispersal models they have. They are working a lot on very small satellite tags with a long-term battery on it to have the chance to have a longer track. But the problem is that the turtle will grow up quite fast, and then the tag will fall down because of the scale that will grow up. So this is a very tricky part to try to understand. So what they do is that we know, like in the Sargasso area, we know that it's a place where a lot of loggerheads, juveniles, aggregate. So they catch so it's not hatchlings, just like turtle that size, so very small one. So they deploy on that place, tags on them. So just they are following the seagrass drifting patterns, or if they are moving from one seagrass patch to another one, try to understand. But it's hard to try to improve that last year's part. Huh?
Okay, thank you for the answer.
Okay, last one maybe?
Last
Go ahead.
question. It's more about like conservation and on-site management mode. But for example, in La Réunion, there is no more nesting turtle, like 1 or 2.
Don't say that.
Yeah, almost. But I know that Le Sète or Colonia are kind of working hard on making the beaches more appropriate to hope to host nesting turtles again. But like when you present this and saying that the whole population of the West Indian Ocean is like growing and going well, and how do you like convince government to help you try to have more turtles since it's
I think
going well?
it's site dependent. La Réunion is really proud of their turtles. So it's not complicated to convince them to put money in that. And the argument nowadays, Colonia and Sète has to rebuild the beach and plant some endemic plants and etc. It's because the first net, we have at least two turtle nesting in line, Gabi and Emma. And the first nest was 20 years ago. So we're expecting the baby hatchlings to come back to La Réunion. So it's one of the arguments saying, we need to rebuild the beach and put the endemic plants and etc. Because everybody is waiting for the sons of Gabi or Emma to come back to La Réunion.
So it's really more about like they're proud and it's like a sign of.
But again, they are using a turtle like flag species, they are not rebuilding a beach with endemic plants just for turtles. It's because you are rebuilding the old range. So they are just removing exotic plants and putting some endemic ones, the one that were there in the past. So it's an excuse, yes, that I think is really good for biodiversity in general, because it was the natural plants that we found in La Réunion. So, but for the people who are gonna see the publicity and the money for that, oh, it's turtle, okay, it's La Réunion turtle. But in fact, it's not only for turtle.
Thank you, Jerome.